Good morning, everybody, and thanks for showing up to the pre-show trailer that we did this morning. I wanted to get that up for you guys, the killer clowns from outer space, and also a couple clips from the supernatural episodes that we've been talking about, in which they mention circuses and clowns. Now, that particular episode of Supernatural was very interesting. We'll get into that on tomorrow's show. But basically, the episode is called Lotus, and it's about demon possession. It's about the actual president of the United States being possessed by a demon. We all know that Lotus means Kamala. And there's that cryptic scene from I Pet Goat 2 that shows the lotus flower opening underneath Obama at his feet, and his eyes growing very big like he's being possessed. And I believe that that was all about Lotus, which is Lucifer of the United States. So we'll break down that trailer tomorrow. But I wanted to open up today's show with a simple observation, and you guys have probably noticed this as well. When I walk around in public, I would say about half to 3/4 of America, at least in the area there where I'm living, are wearing masks and still a little bit sensitive about how close you get to them, social distancing. But something weird happens when we turn on the news, or when we look at the mainstream news or mainstream media, or even films that have been filmed within the last year. They don't have any of that, do they? I don't see people wearing masks in movies. Do you? Like the new Bond film. Is anyone wearing a mask? No. Or some of the other movies that have been filmed during the spamdemic. Nobody's distancing. There's nothing in any of these films that would suggest that there's a spamdemic going on, right? So this is kind of weird. Because what does this mean? What are they up to? Now, some people can look at this and say, well, this is a good sign, Casey. That means they're almost done with their little operation and we can go back to life as normal. But I don't think that that's the case. I think what's really happening here is that they're providing some kind of escape. When you turn on the TV, they don't want you focused on all the negative, which they are pushing. They want to pretend like they're focusing on other things. You see, they realize that the human consciousness in our psyche can easily be overwhelmed by too much of this messaging that they're putting onto us. And they're realizing that people are reaching their tipping points. They're already starting to do stories about mental health and the toll that it's taken. There have been at least one college that's been shut down because they had a rash of students who took their own life. So, it's weird. When you turn on TV, you don't really see signs that a spamdemic is happening unless they're programming you. But the entertainment media is not showing you that anymore. So today's show is going to be about prions or prions. You can pronounce it either way. And what are they? Well, nobody really knows their function, which is the creepy thing. Now, the human body has good prions, and then there are what are called bad prions. Now, the bad prions are virtually indestructible, which makes them very alien-like, doesn't it? And very creepy. You can't kill them with radiation, heat, or cold. There's only one way they've found that they think can kill them, and it has something to do with like gas and something else. We're going to read that today. But the bad prions are very, very bad. And what they do is they take over the healthy prions. And it's almost like a cancer where it begins taking over the tissue. And it targets the brain, which of course, as soon as brain tissue destruction begins to happen, all kinds of crazy things start to happen. Now, before you freak out, understand that most prions only infect animals of the same species. Unless you go out of your way to eat the brains or hearts of these animals where some of these prions can lodge themselves, you're probably going to be okay. But as we read these descriptions, I want you to think about how zombie-like these symptoms are. And also we know that in zombie lore that they feed on brains, which is basically the way that most of these prions are transmitted. I also want you to take note that most prion diseases, except for sheep prion disease, was only recently discovered in like the 1960s and 70s. This is a relatively new phenomenon. Scabies, which is the sheep prion disease, was discovered in like the 17 or 1800s. That was the only one. And like I said, that was not able to jump species. Let's read this first paragraph about prions. It says, prion is the name given to a class of proteins which can cause severe neurological diseases in a host of mammalian species, including humans. These disorders are a result of the misfolding of naturally found proteins in host tissue. While the exact mechanism of transmission from protein to protein are not completely understood, the general mechanism of infection is that existing misfolded proteins cause the same misfolding in these existing normal proteins. These misfolded proteins are extremely resilient. They're resistant to extreme temperatures, both dry and wet, as well as radiation. The accumulation of diseased prions in mammalian tissues, commonly in the nervous system, causes transmissible spongiform encephalopathies. This name reflects the appearance of the infected animal's tissue after infection. The brain and related tissue resemble sponges because of the disintegration of the tissue by the misfolded protein. In general, these disorders are characterized by a long incubation period, followed by an aggressive and always fatal loss of brain and nervous system function. In addition, these diseases do not induce an inflammatory response in the diseased individual, which means you don't even have it. Now, let's read about this first kind of prion disease called scabies. This is the one that was discovered in 1732. It only affects sheep and goats. And the symptoms here are tremors, locked muscles, loss of movement, vision and coordination, posture abnormality, grinding teeth, salivation, and regurgitation. Does this all sound familiar? This sounds like a zombie. Now, one of these prion diseases is called zombie deer disease because of the zombie-like effects. Now, they've dissected these infected animals, and they can find these misfolded proteins in the nervous system, the tonsils, the muscles, the placenta, the colon, intestine, spleen, and lymph nodes. And with scabies, the incubation period is 2 to 5 years, and the individual dies between 2 weeks and 6 months after the disease presents itself. And the studies say that the bodily fluids and waste products are infectious, suggesting that the prion is commonly transmitted horizontally, but it can lay dormant in the soil for years, resulting in outbreaks years after infected individuals have been removed from the herd. Now, up until recently, they did not believe that scabies was transmissible to humans. But now they think that there's a link between scabies and Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. And this just goes to show you that science doesn't know everything. So first they told us that it wasn't transmissible between sheep and people, but now all of a sudden it is. And this raises questions about certain sheep inoculations that were cultured in sheep brains. This was a disaster a well-known disaster from 1935 in which 1,500 sheep basically caught this prion disease through an infected inoculation. It's called the Mordun disaster. Now, this raises questions because there were older generations of rabies vaccines, and they were cultured in sheep brains as well. Remember, the brains is where this is most contaminated, where the most prions tend to congregate. And so think about these older generations of rabies vaccines that were cultured in sheep brains. Now, we know that there are programs going on right now around the world in which they're dropping rabies pellets into the wild to try to eradicate rabies. Now, according to most of their public statements, these vaccines that they're dropping are newer generation. They're not cultured in sheep brains. But what if some were mixed in with it? That would be very bad, because what that would mean is that they could be actually inadvertently spreading prions into the natural environment. Now, these very same sheep brain cultured vaccines are being used right now as we speak in India and in Africa. India actually kicked them out recently, within the last 5 or 10 years. But Africa, they are still allowing these sheep brain cultured rabies vaccines to be used. Can anyone say kuru? Now, it's rare, but deer can get scrapies like sheep, but sheep can't get deer's prion disease. And what is this that the deer get? The deer have a different prion, which is called chronic wasting disease, also known as zombie deer disease. So, as of now, they're saying that humans are not affected by prion-infected deer, because that was my first concern, that these deer prions could have been making people sick. But who knows what science will say in 5 or 10 years. Let me tell you what is happening with the deer population in America. This is where this prion disease has affected American deer. Here's the map. And as you can see, this is Quebec up here. There's also lots of it around, what is this, Michigan, Wisconsin. Some in, what is this, is that Pennsylvania? Is that Pennsylvania? Yes, Pennsylvania. And Virginia. A little bit in the upper corner of Arkansas. These are free-ranging deer that are infected with this prion. And this is decimating these populations of deer. What else do we have here? What is this? Idaho. This is very, very eastern Idaho. Not sure how many people live there. Utah. Is this Kansas here? And Missouri has quite a bit. No, that's not Missouri. Missouri's over here. What is this? Colorado. So we've got some issues in the U.S. It is a silent epidemic of chronic wasting disease in deer. So what does this mean? It means less natural food for humans, and if you're in an emergency situation, or you'd have to be careful. Okay, now here's an interesting thing. They say that this cannot be transmitted to humans. But I found this video from the Arkansas Fish and Game, and in the regulations, they say that as a hunter in Arkansas, you have to submit a sample of your deer to the laboratory. It's, I guess, part of the regulations. And they test it for chronic wasting disease. And in 7 days, they get the result. They notify you of the positive result if there is one. And even though they say that it cannot transmit to humans, they tell you right here in this video, they do not eat the deer. Let's watch this quick video here.
Chronic wasting disease is a fatal neurological disease found in the natural state's white-tailed deer and elk herds. CWD is caused by a protein that occurs naturally in animals. The disease usually isn't noticeable until the later stages of sickness.
Now that's what makes it scary, because you don't know that the deer is infected until the later stages of sickness. So deer could look perfectly healthy and it could still have this. Now, this reminds me of the biblical scriptures that say that had he not cut those days short, there would be no flesh left. And I'm wondering if this will be one of the vials opened in the last days, the disease of Revelation let out, that will decimate the flesh, all flesh. Because when it says no flesh left, it's not just talking about humans. It's talking about wildlife. Let's keep watching this here.
Which makes CWD detection a challenge for wildlife managers in the 26 states and 4 countries where it's been found. The Arkansas Game and Fish Commission
26 states, 4 countries. Most of these countries that it's found in are developing countries. Think about that for a second. Countries where, or I'm sorry, not developing, but developed countries. Think about that. You have free countries where you have gun rights, and all of a sudden it just so happens that the deer in those countries have this disease. I'm starting to wonder if this wasn't some kind of bioweapon.
Commission relies on the state's hunters for samples that are used for research and the development of CWD management plans.
Since 2016, since CWD was discovered in the state, our staff have worked very hard in collecting information, collecting data, collecting samples. And so the last deer season 2020, Arkansas hunters submitted nearly 8,000 samples statewide. And so that gives us a lot of confidence as to where this disease is at and where it's not been detected.
CWD has changed deer hunting for some Arkansans. In counties in the CWD management zone where the disease is most prevalent, regulations have played a key role in managing the disease and preventing its spread to other parts of the state. Although there aren't any new CWD regulations for the 2021-2022 deer season, previous regulations regarding CWD remain in place. Current regulations can be found at agfc.com/CWD and also in the annual Hunting Regulations Guidebook.
Now, I'm not sure if it's mandatory that you submit a sample, but it may be. If you're a hunter in Arkansas, let us know if this is mandatory or not. Let me go check in with you guys for a second. Let's keep watching this.
We ask that all hunters, of course, follow regulations. They're there in place for a reason, but also have your deer tested. That information, a positive test is just a value or as a negative test to us. We want a red dot just as well as we do a green dot on a map. For those hunters outside the CWD zone, testing is just as valuable to us. That we have quotas set aside for every county. We have certain targets. So when we reach those targets in those counties, we have a certain amount of confidence whether or not that disease is present or absent in that county. Our goal is to have free testing in every county of the state from the very beginning of deer season to the very last day of deer season, and we're accomplishing that goal. We have over 100 freezers located throughout the state, over 50 taxidermists, and you can go to agfc.com/CWD, and that'll take you straight to the page so you can learn all the information.
Now, I think it's probably a good thing that this is free and that you could find out if your deer has this before you eat it. But here's the problem. I believe that they're just collecting data to see how effective their bioweapon is and see exactly where they need to spread more of it. Now, that's just my own personal belief. I don't have proof of that. But again, think back to where this thing is showing up in the world. It's showing up in places where we have hunting rights, and they are concerned and they don't want people living off the land anymore.
After voluntary samples are collected from game and fish drop-off locations, they're sent to a laboratory for testing.
We're working with our laboratory here in Arkansas. The Arkansas Department of Agriculture has a lab, and we're very fortunate to partner with them this year. So we're able to just submit samples directly to Little Rock. And normally turnaround times within about 7 days. We're trying our best to get that cut down even further. We understand that's an inconvenience to many of our hunters, but we just ask that you be patient with us, that especially during the high volume times of the year right after modern gun season. But we're going to work as hard as we can to get samples quickly. We will contact hunters if their results come back CWD positive, and we encourage hunters not to consume CWD positive deer. That's a recommendation.
We say do not consume, but as you just heard me read, they say that it can be transferred to humans. So which is it?
From the Arkansas Department of Health and from the Center for Disease Control. And so we're going to ask that the hunter dispose of that meat, and we can help with the disposal of the positive meat.
More than 33,000 deer and elk have been tested in Arkansas since CWD was initially detected in
33,000, really?
2016.
So they detected it in 2016. This is a new phenomenon in Arkansas, and this is very sad because the way this disease works is it stays in the environment, and eventually all the deer will be affected. They say that they can control it, but really, are they really going to be able to?
With more than 1,000 samples testing positive for the disease. The 2020
wait.
1,000 samples.
So
More than 33,000 deer and elk have been tested in Arkansas since CWD was initially detected in 2016, with more than 1,000 samples testing positive for the disease.
So that's a lot, 1,000 out of 33,000.
The 2020-2021 deer season marked the highest number of samples submitted by hunters.
Since CWD was identified in 2016, one of the overall missions for the Game and Fish is to partner with our hunters. That we realized chronic wasting disease was going to be a challenge to this state, and that there was no way that we could manage this disease without the partnership of our hunters. And I believe we've done that. I understand that it's an inconvenience. I understand that these regulations maybe displace some hunters or maybe alter the change of some hunters' habits. But we hope that the hunters understand the value of these regulations. But they have been a great partner to us. They've been submitting samples, and I'm very proud of how our hunters have stepped up and helped.
So there you go. And, what's going to happen next? Well, you have to ask yourself, where is all this headed? You've got a disease that is indestructible. Where did it come from? It's relatively new on the scene, is it not? Now, there is one particular prion disease that can easily pass to humans, and it's called mad cow disease, otherwise known as bovine spongiform encephalopathy. And if you eat any part of a cow that's infected with this, you can get it. And why is this? Well, according to what their science tells us, the cow prion and the human healthy prion are almost identical, which opens up a pathway so that the bad prion will actually easily infect humans. And that's the way this works. The closer in relation that the prion is between the animals, then it can jump from animal to animal. Now, this did not become this bovine mad cow disease was not discovered in the U.S. until 2003. So once again, a brand new disease. So this is mad cow disease. Now, all these prions are highly infectious, and they can sit in the soil and the environment indefinitely. They're basically flesh-destroying proteins is what they are. Now, let's take a look at these prions, because they were imaged for the first time recently, and I thought that this image was very telling. on a spiritual level. When is this dated here? It doesn't say. So here it is. They imaged these. Let's pull this up and take a look at this image. So as we begin to break this down, understand that prions grow out of the cell membrane. On the left is a normal prion protein. On the right is a misfolded prion protein. Does this remind you of anything? The tree of the knowledge of good and evil comes to mind when I look at this picture. The bad tree on the right, consuming the good tree on the left. The snake eating the dust. You know, it feels very spiritual and biblical, this attack on the flesh, does it not? Now, there's one more thing I want to show you about prions, and that is this 3D view that they came up with. And as we look at this, what I'm seeing on a spiritual level is the head of the serpent. Let's play this through. And I'll try to pause it where I'm seeing a serpent head or a dragon head or a snake. So this is the misfolded proteins. It's weird too because the misfolded proteins spiral out, which is like a spiral gate. The gate to no flesh being left. So, interesting. Let's read this article and see what they have to say about prions. Using cryo-electron microscopy, researchers at Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine and National Institutes of Health open a door to a new level of detail in the study of abnormal proteins that cause untreatable neurodegenerative conditions. Now, they're starting to also link this to possibly Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. They're saying that these might be related to these prions. The highest ever resolution images of an infectious prion has provided the first atomic level data of how these abnormal proteins are assembled to cause fatal neurodegenerative diseases in people and animals, and how they can potentially be targeted by new therapies. These detailed prion structures provide a new premise for understanding and targeting these currently untreatable diseases, says this lady right here. It will be much easier to develop and test hypotheses and how prions are assembled as highly infectious and deadly protein structures. So they're looking at the basic building blocks and how these prions transmit their irregular, misfolded shapes onto the regular version of the same protein. The source of mammalian diseases, including Creutzfeldt-Jakob and its variant, and some other syndromes. So, it says similar prion-like mechanisms occur in the characteristic proteins suspected in the development of other neurodegenerative conditions, including Parkinson's, Lou Gehrig's, and Alzheimer's. Though instances are rare, prion diseases can be transmitted between people. Others are readily transmissible between animals, such as chronic wasting. So, interesting, right? Now, what better way for the enemy to wage war on God than to come up with something like this and release it onto the world and to get rid of all the flesh so that God would have to bring about the end. So that's what I wanted to show you guys today. We'll be back on here tomorrow with some more creepy clowns and some discoveries we made in the show Supernatural, as well as the movie Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Let me go into the chat for a little bit. The proteins. Jacob's trouble, says Soul and Peace. I believe that may be the case. All right. Thanks, Kelly Jelly. Thanks, Starlight, Knowledge 2020. All right, you guys. I'm going to go ahead and pop off here. I got a lot of work to do today. We'll be back on here first thing in the morning. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Take care and be safe, everyone.